There are moments we all reach a breaking point, a quiet second when the weight of the world becomes too heavy to carry alone. For Mara, that moment arrived on a freezing platform, her body aching, her pride dissolving. She only needed one thing, a simple place to rest. But in a crowd of hundreds, her pain went completely unseen. The city train station was a cathedral of chaos. It was late afternoon, the dreaded rush hour, and the air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and desperate hurry. People flowed like a panicked river, each commuter locked inside their own tight little world, eyes fixed on phones, collars pulled high against the persistent, spitting rain outside. Standing just beyond the main current was Mara. She was only 14, but the weariness in her eyes made her look far older. Her backpack, stuffed with textbooks and the weight of a long day, slumped heavily on her shoulders. Her whole body was angled awkwardly, bracing herself against the cold, damp pillar she was leaning on. She was resting her weight on two battered aluminum crutches. Every movement was a struggle, a tiny, silent battle. Her left leg ended just above the knee, replaced by a gray carbon fiber prosthetic, a necessary tool that was currently betraying her. The socket felt tight, chafing skin she couldn't even feel, sending sharp jolts of pain up her core with every attempt to shift her balance. She had missed the special transport home because she'd stayed late helping a teacher with a school project. Now, she was miles away from her small apartment, stranded, and the next train was delayed indefinitely due to track work. She scanned the platform for a seat, but the few coveted benches were jammed. Not just full, but deliberately crowded. People avoided her gaze, shifted their bags closer, or became instantly engrossed in their footwear, pretending the girl on crutches didn't exist. She felt fiercely and painfully invisible. Across the crowded platform, a man named Rowan was fighting a battle of his own. Rowan was in his late 30s, wearing a mechanic's jacket still faintly smelling of grease, his face etched with a different kind of fatigue. He wasn't physically injured, but he was drowning in the sheer logistics of single parenthood. He was desperately wrangling two small, exhausted children. 6-year-old Leo, who was currently attempting to nap, sprawled out on his backpack, and 4-year-old Maya, who insisted on wearing her bright yellow coat backward, making it impossible to buckle. Rowan had managed to secure a tiny, rare slice of bench space near a trash can. Not ideal, but it was something for his tired family. The bench was clearly meant for 2, maybe 3 people, but it was crammed with their life. A folded stroller, 3 oversized shopping bags filled with groceries, a half-spilled box of animal crackers, and his 2 children. He felt the constant, nagging stress of his tight budget, quietly checking his bank balance on his phone, trying to make the numbers work. He was distracted, stressed, and focused solely on making it home before his children melted down completely. He saw the movement of the crutches approaching from his periphery, but his mind immediately dismissed it. Not my problem. I have my own crisis to manage. He was actively preparing to shrink himself and his belongings, hoping the girl would just keep walking. There was simply no logical room left on the bench for another person. But then the movement stopped. The scraping metal of the aluminum crutches ceased, and silence descended right beside their chaotic mess. Mara stood perfectly still, her prosthetic leg locked to give her a moment of fleeting stability. The burning pain was now a high, steady whine beneath her skin, making her jaw clench. This was her absolute last chance before she would have to admit defeat and sink onto the cold, grimy, unforgiving floor of the station. She adjusted her grip on the crutches, trying to look composed, and took a deep, shaky breath, preparing her ears for the inevitable, humiliating rejection. She looked down at Rowan, who was momentarily focused on wrestling a stubborn, stuck zipper on Maya's coat. Her voice, usually steady and strong, came out barely audible, a fragile plea lost against the mounting noise of the platform. "Excuse me, sir. I know it's terribly crowded," she started, her stomach twisting. Rowan paused, letting out an internal sigh of annoyance at the interruption. He finally looked up, not at the prosthetic or the crutches, but at her face. He saw the sheer, desperate determination fighting a losing battle against tears. He saw an exhaustion that shockingly mirrored his own, only amplified. She finished the question, her entire slight frame trembling slightly with the effort and pain. "Can I sit here?" The 3 seconds that followed felt like an hour of agonizing suspense. The sound of the next train pulling into the station seemed to mute completely. The whole platform, the entire world, seemed to momentarily hold its breath, waiting for this stressed, struggling father's answer. Rowan looked at his pile of bags, his exhausted, sleeping son, his squirming daughter, and then back into Mara's pleading eyes. In that instant, he didn't see an inconvenience. He saw a fellow human who had reached the very end of her rope. He remembered the dark, impossible days after his wife passed away, the days when he wanted nothing more than for one single person to simply ask, "Are you okay?" or offer a moment of unexpected grace. His mind made a snap decision that completely contradicted every stressed, rushed instinct he possessed. He didn't utter the easy thing, which would have been, "I'm sorry, we're really full." He didn't even hesitate. Instead, he stood up abruptly, actively pushing his own fatigue and stress aside. His movement was decisive and startling. "Wait," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle and kind. He immediately grabbed his son, Leo, who groaned in drowsy protest, and settled him securely and protectively onto his lap, holding him tight. Then, with swift motions, he gathered the 3 massive shopping bags and the folded stroller, hoisting them all with a grunt and placing them carefully behind the bench, blocking the walkway, but creating precious space on the wooden seat. He turned back to Mara, pointing to the now clear, if narrow, space beside his daughter, Maya. "I apologize," he said, his tired eyes crinkling into a genuine, fatherly smile. "We were taking up all the room, and that's not fair. Of course, you can sit here. There's plenty of room here for a friend to rest." The contrast between her desperate expectation of cold rejection and his immediate, genuine welcome was a profound, physical shock to Mara. The simplicity of his kindness hit her with the surprising, cleansing force of a wave. Her cheeks flushed bright red, not from embarrassment, but from overwhelming, soul-deep relief. She carefully maneuvered her crutches, her hands shaking slightly, lowered herself gingerly onto the edge of the bench, and let out a long, silent, shuddering breath. It was the deepest, most relieving exhale she had taken all day. The simple, ordinary act of sitting felt like a priceless gift she hadn't deserved. She watched as Rowan returned to his seat, effortlessly balancing his sleeping son and his restless daughter, suddenly making space for her in their messy, cluttered, and now miraculously welcoming world. The acute tension in Mara's shoulders immediately dissolved. Maya, the 4-year-old, quickly broke the ice. She leaned over and gently tapped Mara's worn backpack. "Is that an astronaut sticker?" she whispered, pointing with a sticky finger. Mara looked down and managed a real, soft smile, a genuine spark in her eyes for the first time. "It is," she confirmed. "That's because I'm going to be an aerospace engineer someday." Leo, woken properly by his father's shifting, sat up and eyed her crutches with open, innocent curiosity, not judgment. "Are those like robot legs?" he asked, fascinated. Mara laughed, a dry, rusty sound that cleared her throat. "Sort of," she said, and for the next few minutes, she found herself simply talking, not explaining her disability, but sharing her hopes, her difficult school projects, and the story behind her sticker collection. The exhaustion on her face started to recede. Rowan watched them interact, the weight lifting slightly from his shoulders, too. He wordlessly handed Mara a stray pack of animal crackers from the grocery bag. "Fuel for future engineers," he joked, offering a small, shared smile. Mara took a deep bite, savoring the simple sweetness, and suddenly, the small talk stopped. The train was still delayed, the platform remaining noisy. In the quiet lull between train announcements, Mara looked directly at Rowan, her voice steady now, but thick and heavy with raw emotion. "Sir, I have to tell you something," she began, her chin trembling. She explained that her prosthetic had a faulty lining, and she had ignored the agonizing pain all day because her mother, Leona, was working a double shift at the hospital and couldn't possibly afford another unexpected trip to the orthotics clinic. "When I missed the school bus, I realized I had to walk the whole way," Mara confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I knew I had hours to go on the crutches. By the time I reached the station, I was truly hurting, and I was just waiting for the next person to look away. I was ready to cry from the sheer pain and the shame of having to ask for help." She took another necessary breath, and this time the tears finally came. They weren't tears of enduring sadness, but of total, unburdened, glorious release. "When I asked, I was expecting everyone else's answer. The look away, the lie about the full bench, the cold no," she choked out. "Your simple yes made me realize I wasn't invisible. You saw me. You let me rest." Rowan simply nodded, unable to speak, the shared humanity of the moment hanging heavy and warm in the cold station air. He didn't offer money or a ride, because he knew what Mara truly needed wasn't a material solution. It was profound validation. It was an acknowledgement that her struggle was real and that she deserved genuine kindness. The delayed train finally pulled in, its arrival a loud, grating promise of movement. As Mara stood up, feeling physically restored and emotionally validated by the short rest and the unexpected connection, she looked at Rowan with gratitude. A simple yes, an act of moving 3 bags and 1 sleeping child. That small decision, made by a stressed single father in a moment of rush, changed Mara's entire desperate day. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the only difference between hope and despair is whether or not a stranger is willing to make space.